Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us.
Welcome to Focus Today. I'm Steve Johnson, and we have, I think, a fascinating discussion that you haven't seen too much from this particular perspective, because in the news we're kind of inundated with a lot of what environmental camps are doing. But what about those who are looking at the effects of that on our society and the impact that we're seeing in the long term? Well, we're happy to have with us Wesley Smith. He's a senior fellow of Discovery Institute's Center on Human Exceptionalism, and he's also the author of quite a few books, including A Rat is a Pig, is a Dog, is a Boy, The Human Cost of the Animal Rights Movement, also The Consumer Guide to a Brave New World, and Culture of Death, The Assault on Medical Ethics in America. He also writes a popular human exceptionalism blog at the National Review Online. You might have read that. It's good to have you with us. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You know, in the news, we're covering all sorts of stories that have to do with environmentalism and environmental actions that are going on, which I think are quite different from those of conservation efforts, although we haven't really defined the difference between those two. But we're hearing a lot about whether it's the popular topic of global warming or climate change, as it's called now, or whatever. It looks as if you have been looking at this from a bigger scenario about what is really pushing what you see as the environmental movement. Tell us what I'm seeing a theme with a lot of your books. What conclusion have you come up with?
Yeah, you know, when I started doing this kind of work, which was at first against assisted suicide, I hadn't come up with this kind of overarching connecting of the dots understanding. But the more I got involved in things like utilitarian bioethics that seek to create distinctions among the quality of human life in terms of value, animal rights, which has to be distinguished from animal welfare, but animal rights seeks to create a moral equality between humans and animals. And now in the environmental movement, which has not only ceased to be what it once was, which was to promote human thriving in the context of using responsible environmental practices, which of course is something we should do, it's become positively anti-human. How many times these days do you hear, whether it's in global warming advocacy or other kinds of environmental agitation, that humans are the cancer on the planet, we're the AIDS on the planet, we are the ones who are the enemies of the planet. And this becomes a very disturbing thing. It's not a healthy approach. Let me give you just an example.
Okay.
You've seen, probably, at least certainly my age, we used to go to these sci-fi matinees, and there was a great old science fiction movie called The Day the Earth Stood Still. And it starred Michael Rennie, and the movie was about an alien who comes down to Earth with his killer robot Gort. The alien's name was Klaatu. Mm-hmm. And Klaatu has come to Earth in 1951, in this version, to save humankind from itself. Because we're developing atomic weapons. This is when the Cold War was starting, potential for nuclear conflagration. And so the alien comes to save human beings from ourselves because we're worth it, right?
Okay.
In the 2008 remake, they have the exact same story of what happens to the alien Klaatu when he comes to Earth, but the mission of the alien is completely different. In the 2008 version, the alien here is here to commit total genocide. That is, to kill each and every human being on the planet to save the Earth. That's a gigantic difference. And spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, we talk Klaatu into not killing us all. And he says, all right, I won't kill you all, but there's going to be a price. And as he leaves the Earth, his spaceship issues a pulse, and we are rendered completely non-technological. That would kill billions of people. The message, and this is A-list Hollywood, Keanu Reeves. The message is that human beings are the enemy. Human beings are the villains. And you're also concomitantly with that seeing agitation for things like nature rights. That is, the rights of nature to be co-equal to those of people. And let me give you an example I have right here of how this is defined. And often, by the way, it's kind of a neo-pagan earth religion. This is from the Constitution of Ecuador. Nature, or Pachamama. Pachamama is the Incan earth goddess. where life is reproduced and exists, has the right to exist, persist, maintain, and regenerate its vital cycle, structure, function, and its processes and evolution. That's a right to life for nature. And the idea for this is that if the rights, and they mean it, the rights of nature come into conflict with those of people, then you have to go to court to determine whether nature wins or whether people win. And the chances of court are very high because everybody is entitled to sue to protect the rights of nature. Now you might say, well, don't worry, Wesley, that's Ecuador. It's a small country. They're not real powerful. It's also in Bolivia. Well, that's also a small country. Well, it's also in 30 cities in the United States, including Pittsburgh, which is closer to you, and Santa Monica, which is closer to me. I grew up in Los Angeles. I know Santa Monica like the back of my hand. There's no nature left in Santa Monica. The reason for making a nature rights declaration is ideological. Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations, supports nature rights. And it has been, uncoincidentally and not surprisingly, proposed for inclusion in a global warming treaty to fight global warming. And what would this do? This would bring human thriving to a screeching halt because we couldn't make use of the resources that help provide prosperity. So you see in global warming, and this is the anti-human consequence of these kinds of policies, the desire to reduce our prosperity in the name of saving the planet. And what will that mean to the destitute countries such as in Africa that may be very resource rich but haven't been able to really get their act together in terms of creating prosperity because of cultural problems, no rule of law, things of this sort? They would be stifled from actually obtaining the kind of prosperity we enjoy in the West. And that's why you see proposal after proposal to take hundreds of billions of dollars from Western countries, developed countries, transfer that money to underdeveloped or developing countries. But that's just going to turn them into dependency cultures, which isn't a healthy thing either. So what's happened in the last 20, 30 years is an anti-humanism has infected the environmental movement. It is dangerous to our self-perception as unique and important beings of unique dignity and importance, and it is undercutting our ability to provide for humankind in a way that will provide good and decent and healthy lives. So it's very dangerous, I think, and that's why I called the ebook The War on Humans.
Okay, I want to let our audience know that we're talking to Wesley Smith. He's a senior fellow with the Discovery Institute Center on Human Exceptionalism, and we're talking about some of the trends that he's seeing. Let me ask you about the motivation behind all of this. You know, if you took a biblical perspective, it says that men and women are supposed to subdue the earth. It's not the other way around. Where is this coming from? You talk about the change in 25 years. Why? Why is this changing?
I think there are a few things at work here. One is I think I call the green movement has turned brown. By that I mean when you mix green and red, you get brown. There is an unnecessary anti-free market ideology that has really entered into environmental activism, which is very, very ironic considering that the most polluting societies in our world today have been and are communist. The Soviet Union was a terrible polluter, and today China is probably the worst polluter on the planet. Secondly, I think there is a desire to destroy Judeo-Christian moral philosophy as the backbone of our civilization. Judeo-Christian moral philosophy, which I'm distinguishing from the faith for the moment, sees the individual human being as having unique dignity. That is the basis of our freedom. That is the basis of our prosperity. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the fundamental founding premise, in essence, of Western civilization today. Third, I think there is a desire to destroy Christianity as a faith, because many on the left in particular, but view it as moralistic, and there is I think a desire to marginalize Christian influence within the society.
And that's having such an impact that you're saying that Does everybody within those movements understand how these are all linked together, or are they somewhat drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak?
I would say that that not everybody is sitting around plotting these things as I've described them. I think many in the leadership certainly understand that they want to destroy Judeo-Christian moral philosophy because they don't believe in human exceptionalism. Animal rights activists, and this has to be distinguished from animal welfare, which is a human duty, that is treating animals humanely. But animal rights says that humans and animals have equal moral worth, and they base the ability to have rights on suffering. That is, if you can feel pain, this is the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals type people, then you have rights. It's called painiance. And so since a cow can feel pain and a human being can feel pain, a cow and a human are equal, and therefore what you do to the cow is the same as if you did the same thing to the human. Now, that's very destructive. Listen to this. This is from PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. They had something called the Holocaust on Your Plate campaign, which they tried to convince young people. And by the way, a lot of this is aimed at the young. And there's a reason for that. And I hope your listeners and viewers will talk to their children and ask, what are you being taught about environmentalism? What are you being taught about the place of human beings on the earth? And you might find that your kids are being taught that they're the enemies.
You know, let me, before you go further, let me just ask you this. Do you, this is fascinating. I'd love to take another 15-minute segment with you. Do you have time to do that?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Hold on there. I have a lot of questions asked, and I know that you have more to let us know about it. I'll mention that we're talking to Wesley Smith, Senior Fellow of the Discovery Institute Center on Human Exceptionalism, and we're going to be back talking more about how the environmental movement may have changed totally from its emphasis a couple decades ago. It's coming up here on Focus Today in our next segment. Well, welcome back to Focus Today. Steve Johnson here with you, and we're talking with Wesley Smith. He's a senior fellow of the Discovery Institute Center on Human Exceptionalism. And we're talking about the environmental movement in broad terms and how it has changed, getting into more specifics to all of this. And is there really a war on humans? Save the earth at all cost, and do not consider the aspect of the humans who are, according to a biblical premise anyway, supposed to be the ones in charge and, as it says in the Bible, to subdue the earth. I appreciate you staying on with us for another segment here. I want to ask you a little bit, if we have this environmental movement, if I can summarize it, that has changed from what it had been to now more of an activist view against humans and saying we have to have laws that provide for nature as opposed to the humans who live on planet Earth. Normally we have a point-counterpoint to issues. Is there any kind of opposition to this particular trend you're seeing, or is it so fragmented that some of these laws, as you mentioned, can be just enacted in countries and cities and steamroll over any other views that capitalistic society might have?
You know, one of the things that I see happening in the environmental issue, particularly around the global warming controversy, is the idea that there's not allowed to be a give and take. There's not allowed to be a point and counterpoint. How many times have we been told in the global warming controversy that it's a fact, that there's no debate, that it must be done? And in fact, the LA Times has gotten to the place where they have announced that they will refuse to print letters to the editor that question the reality of human-caused global warming.
Wow.
So you have a real tinge of authoritarianism moving into this field. One of the things I point out in the War on Humans is that you've got a lot of mainstream environmentalists now extolling China as the model. One of the things that many in this movement want to do is have radical depopulation, human depopulation. Well, and then they look at China's one-child policy as having been the right approach. But look what that's involved. Forced abortion, female infanticide, eugenics, a terrible tyranny, babies ripped out of their mother's bodies against the mother's will. And yet these good, genteel, quote, liberals say, well, this is the good way to go. But take a look at the results of the China policy. They have not reduced the number of Chinese people in their country. They have slowed the rate of growth of population. Imagine what it would take to just even reduce the human population by 10%, the kind of draconian, deadly policies. Now, a lot of these people would never support those kinds of policies, but that's the only way they're going to get from here to there based on what they say they want. And you've got a lot of very radical kind of crazy people like the Unabomber who pick up this kind of thinking and may do things that are very untoward.
Well,
and again, I'm sorry?
Well, I was just going to say, if we have then a group that is able to effectively get legislation passed, you mentioned in Ecuador and Bolivia and other cities.
30 cities in this country,
right,
and potentially in the United Nations Treaty on Global Warming.
Is there any stopping this for people who are opposed to it? Because it sounds like it's kind of being steamrolled through.
Well, part of the reason it's being steamrolled through is that people are not aware of the distinct anti-humanism that this way comes, which is why I'm doing the work I'm doing, not only in terms of the ebook, but the Discovery Institute with whom I work, and I'm a senior fellow there, as you mentioned. They have a companion free YouTube video that's a documentary on this that people can watch if they go to waronhumans.com, and it's a 30-minute, it's free on YouTube. They can take a look and see what we're talking about. And my books, which are on the War on Humans books, are on Kindle and Nook. And one of the things this is my first ebook. Usually I write hardcover books, but one of the things that I found really helpful in terms of this ebook is like when I mention that there's a commercial out there called No Pressure to support an anti-global warming initiative, and that this commercial literally blows children up who refuse to accept global warming in a very vivid and graphic and bloody way. People can say, well, is that true? But there's a link in the ebook. It'll take them on their e-reader to the website where they can see the commercial themselves. So for me, this is really an interesting experiment, because rather than just footnotes and describing, people can see for themselves. A picture's worth 1,000 words. I think if people wake up to what's happening and then their antennae are up for the anti-humanism, and when somebody says, oh, human beings are cancer on the planet, you can say, we're not cancers. We're the only species that have duties. We're the only ones who look to engage in responsible environmentalism. Look at the tremendous benefit that has been received by the proper use of resources, and fight back against this. I think it's really important for the children, though, to hear a positive human exceptionalism message, not just in terms of being made in the likeness and image of God. I'm not saying that's not part of it, but also the idea, look, any other species, when a seal washes up on the beach like they do here in California, other species will either eat that injured seal or ignore it and allow it to starve to death. Humans save that seal. There is a difference about human beings that is we should teach our children, that is not only in terms of we have unique value, but also that we have to fulfill our human responsibilities, our duties to ourselves, our duties to our posterity, our duties to treat animals humanely and properly, and our duties to treat the environment in a responsible manner. That's a positive message that can lead to prosperity, as well as reasonable environmental practices, a clean planet, and so forth. The target number one of the environmental movement right now is the Alberta Tar Sands, which has the potential to bring so much energy to the world and kind of wean us off of the Middle Eastern oil and heat our homes and fuel our transportation and so forth. They're trying to close that down. There's an environmental activist agenda item called ecocide. Ecocide seeks to criminalize as a felony akin to genocide, which shows you again in anti-humanism. The idea that mining copper is the same thing as Auschwitz is really disturbing. And let me read you the definition of ecocide. Ecocide is the extensive destruction, damage to, or loss of ecosystems of a given territory. The territory isn't defined, by the way. It could be a field. Whether by human agency or other causes, to the extent that peaceful enjoyment by the inhabitants of that territory has been severely diminished. Guess what? Inhabitants doesn't mean people. It means the trees, it means the snails, it means the lizards, it means the birds. Therefore, you see an elevation of flora and fauna to the same level as human beings. And the target that they're after most to prevent is the Alberta Tar Sands. They've had a mock trial in the English Supreme Court to show you how far this has come, where they found two fictional CEOs of the Alberta Tar Sands oil companies guilty of ecocide and jailed for extracting oil from the land. That's where this is heading. The media doesn't cover it because the media wants to convince everybody that global warming is real, and the media thinks that if you stand up for human exceptionalism, you're some kind of a dinosaur. But human exceptionalism is essential for freedom, for dignity, for liberty, and prosperity. And when people realize that this attack is on, I think they'll stand up and say, we're not going to go down this route.
All right. Just in the brief time that we have, is it your experience that some of this, you talked about teaching our children, is any of this being taught as a curriculum in our schools, from what you know?
Anecdotally is all I can say. I haven't done a study of the approved curricula, but realize a lot of times things are done in school that are not necessarily approved. This is an anecdote. I have a friend who has a granddaughter, and they were driving in the Sierra Mountains. She's about 3. And they pulled over into a restaurant because they were going to get a bite to eat, and they saw a digger digging in the earth. And the little girl got very upset. She said, "Don't let them hurt the earth, Grandpa. Don't let them hurt the earth." And he looked at her and he said, "Honey, where did you get that idea?" And she got it in her Episcopalian nursery school. Wow. So, I mean, this is very serious stuff, and I think people need to be aware and just pay attention, and you might find out there are things going on you didn't expect.
Yeah. Well, this, we have only talked about the iceberg. We've just hit a little bit on this. I appreciate your explaining some of the things you're seeing. To see some of the details that you mentioned, YouTube videos, if they go to waronhumans.com, what is it that they'll see there?
They'll see, first off, a link to the documentary that's free, the YouTube documentary, 30 minutes, based on the book. There's some things in the documentary that I don't have in the book, and there are things in the book that are not in the documentary, but that's produced by the Discovery Institute. And then there are links to the Kindle and Nook version of the ebook. It's $1.99. We want to alert people that this is happening so that we can maintain a society that is prosperous and free.
All right. Now, the books that you have written and the blog on National Review Online, is this something is National Review something you have to pay for now? Or can they see that for free?
No, yeah. You go to nationalreview.com and you look at they have a blog list. I write the Human Exceptionalism blog, and I try to connect the dots between things like euthanasia in Belgium, where they are literally now coupling euthanasia with organ harvesting, where they've just legalized euthanasia for children. And in that law, children have to write a letter saying, "Please kill me." It's amazingly cruel.
Wow.
To the animal rights problems, to the nature rights issues. And I'm trying to show that these things seem to be different issues, and on a certain level they are, but over above, there's an overarching connection of anti-humanism that links them all, and I think it's a sign of the times. And I'm hoping to let people see, listen, there's more of us than of them, but we have to be aware of what's going on and can't just roll our eyes and say, oh, it can't happen here. Anybody who says it can't happen here has been asleep for 50 years.
Wow, fascinating. Our guest has been Wesley Smith. Thanks for being with us. Again, a senior fellow with the Discovery Institute, author of several books, including A Rat is a Pig, Is a Dog is a Boy, The Human Cost of the Animal Rights Movement, also The Consumer's Guide to a Brave New World, and Culture of Death, The Assault on Medical Ethics in America. Thanks very much for being with us.
I appreciate it.
All right, thanks. And stay tuned. We've got more coming up on Focus Today.